Hi friends, my name is Liza and welcome to my book club. My name is Liza. I love fantasy, romance, and all things bookish. If you do too, I highly suggest you subscribe, but only if you want to, because I will be right here on my channel talking about my favorite books, my least favorite books, and all things bookish right here on my YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic. So today I am going to be reviewing a dark mafia romance. It's called Devil of Dublin by BB Easton. It is a dark romance, so before we get into any of the book, I do want to offer a very abbreviated trigger warning list. I'm not going to talk about these things in great detail, but I will be at least briefly mentioning bullying, harassment, child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault. So if those things are something that could be distressing to you, protect your peace at all costs and maybe skip this one. As always, if you do choose to read this book, please make sure that you look up the full list of trigger warnings before you deep dive. It is so important to protect our mental health, you guys, especially when we're reading these dark romances. We're going to start from the outside and work our way in. So I read this book on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy with me, so I'm going to put the covers here on the side. There are two. We have a traditional cover, which has the very sexy, devilish looking man, and then we have the discreet cover, which has the field of clovers. I think they're both really pretty. I am not usually one for, people on covers, like real people. I don't know why, but there's something about real people on book covers that kind of takes me out of it, especially if it doesn't match what I have imagined them to look like. It kind of, it kills the illusion, you know what I mean? But I think this one is pretty good. I think he's a very handsome man, good for him. This man definitely looks like and feels like our male main character. This discreet cover I think is really beautiful. Devil of Dublin is an Irish folklore inspired romance. So this field of clovers really encapsulates the vibe and the aesthetic that BB Easton was going for. And even from the first page, I was really sucked into this, really scenic, beautiful Irish landscape. I think she did a fantastic job of that. And I think this discreet cover really captures that vision. I did a short vlog on my page a few weeks ago when I first started the book, and it goes over the dedication and the blurb on the back. If you're interested in reading about those, check out that video on my page. So Devil of Dublin is a dual POV novel. So we have our female main character, Darby, and the male main character and her love interest, Kellen. It starts with them both as children and kind of follows them up into adulthood. So Darby's mom is recently divorced from her dad, and I think in the very first chapter you really get a sense of this kind of disruptive nature of Darby's life. So she talks about how her dad doesn't really pay attention to her and doesn't give her a lot of love. He's never really present, and him and her mom were constantly arguing. So we already kind of have this childish view on these really adult topics. And that was something that really pulled me into Devil of Dublin when I first started. I thought it was so interesting the way that BB Easton has tackled these very deep, very tense topics, very adult conversations from a childlike perspective. As I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, why the fuck are there no adults in this novel? Like, why are the adults not paying attention to what these two kids are doing? And then I realized that's kind of the point, like, why are there no adults watching these kids? Why are there no adults taking care of these children? But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So it starts with Darby and her mom visiting her grandfather in Ireland. It's the first time that Darby has gone to Ireland to see her grandfather because they can't really afford a lot of plane tickets. So they get to Ireland and her grandfather starts telling her these, stories and folklore about the fairies that live in the woods surrounding his sheep farm. And when she hears these stories about the fairy tales and the fairies in the woods, like as any kid would, she was enraptured. She wanted to go visit these fairies. And so when her mother gives her permission to go explore into the woods, she stumbles across a young boy that can't speak. And this young boy is our main character, Kellen. He is depicted as dirty, hungry, and kind of living in the woods in a dilapidated building that's crumbling. As I was reading it, I was thinking, like, why is this young boy in the woods and why are there no adults to help him? And I was like, this is kind of a hole, right, in the plot. Like, a kid would not be wandering around the woods by themselves. And then I realized, no, this is very much the point. Like, there was no one here to take care of Kellen. And in fact, when the novel switches to his perspective, we can hear his internal monologue about how he is ostracized from his entire village because there is this rumor that he is the son of the devil himself. His mom suffered from substance use issues and dropped him off at the local priest front door. It's not outright depicted in the novel about what this priest was doing to Kellen until a few chapters in. We kind of just have this depiction of a young boy who is obviously malnourished, does not have the proper resources to survive and thrive as a kid should, obviously is not being taken care of. And you have these scenes where Darby will bring him food into the woods because she can tell that he's hungry, or Kellen refuses to be touched by anybody, and it's a scene where he trusts Darby enough to let her hug him, things like that. So we can very clearly see that something is not quite right with Kellen's living situation. A few chapters into the book, we have this scene where Darby and Kellen are swimming and swinging on a rope where you kind of fly into the water. Kellen convinces Darby to go up even though she really doesn't want to, and she ends up falling into some bushes and cutting her hand, and she's bleeding. And she falls into the water, and Kellen follows her. And they're both in the lake that is behind her grandfather's house. And they both are bleeding, and they can kind of feel that there's a presence with them in this lake. And they can hear some murmuring and feel some things that are not quite natural and more supernatural forces at work. At this point in the novel, I kind of was like, are you pulling a trick on me? Is this a paranormal romance? But no, rest assured, it is not a paranormal romance. This is where the Irish folklore comes into play. I believe she's referred to as the Lake Witch, but she blesses people and marries them as fated mates, basically, if they fall into the lake and kiss and their love is proven true. And so this happens to Darby and Kellen. And they're kids still, so they have no idea what the fuck just happened. We as readers don't really understand it either at that point because we are living this life and experiencing this world through that childlike perspective. So it cuts to several years later because Darby was not able to go back to Ireland to visit Kellen for several years because her mom ends up dying. And when her mom ends up dying, she has to go live with her father. You know, the one that never paid any attention to her and was kind of an asshole? Yeah, that one. They are adults now, right? They haven't seen each other for 7 years. And Darby finally comes back to Ireland because she has to attend the funeral of her grandfather. And she brings her new fiance with her. Yeah, her fiance. This relationship between Darby and her fiance is, very clearly depicted as a situation where Darby needed to get out of a bad situation. And so she felt like marrying and entertaining this man was her ticket out of poverty. I think for a lot of us that have experienced poverty and that struggle, that is the dream, to be able to marry into money and never have to worry about anything again. You are willing to make a lot of sacrifices and a lot of compromise to be comfortable. And we hear this a lot in Darby's inner monologue. especially when things start going south. She is willing to sacrifice and compromise a lot of her life and a lot of herself in order to have this comfortability. And I found that to be so real. It was such a flawed perspective on life, and I think that made the character so much more real. You know what I mean? Like, she wasn't this perfect creature, like this perfect, beautiful woman. She was this flawed, hurt, very, very broken woman. And she goes back to Ireland to attend this funeral, and she runs into the woods, and she ends up eventually linking back up with Kellen. And they go through what I think is a pretty generic mafia romance plot, right? So they have the romance, and then something goes wrong, and now the big bads are after them, and they have to live happily ever after, right? I think the plot itself is pretty standard. So the relationship between Kellen and Darby, super interesting. The Irish folklore, so beautiful, so amazing. I have never read anything like it. The scenery, the exposition, so beautiful. But I think once we got past that like 50% mark, the plot kind of fizzled out for me personally. I still rated this book 4 stars. So don't think that the book is bad, because it's not. It's just, I don't think really anything mafia really happened other than the fact that they were running from the mafia, which, I mean, I guess that counts as a mafia romance, but I guess it wasn't really what I was anticipating. It doesn't mean that it's bad though. So Darby and Kellen are both very flawed, very hurt, very traumatized young adults from the past abuse that they have experienced. We learn later on in the story that both Kellen and Darby were sexually abused by older men in their lives. And it has left both of them very sensitive and traumatized in ways that they are not able to fully comprehend. And we see this when they start becoming intimate with each other. They have to stop several times so that they can kind of process the feelings that are coming back into their bodies and through their minds. And I thought that was also very real, because when these things, happen, sometimes we're not able to process them in the way that we should probably immediately. And they kind of just sit with us for a long time until sometimes really inopportune moments, like finally getting to have sex with your fated mate of your childhood dreams, and I thought it was handled so well. I feel like sometimes when I read dark romance, the authors kind of skip past the after it happens, and then they are upset about it, and then it just kind of disappears, or it is somehow used as like a plot device. I think The Devil of Dublin and BB Easton did such a fantastic job of navigating this really nuanced, deep-seated, like traumatic memories that these two individuals have experienced, and allowed them to grow together as well as individuals. So I thought it was very, very well done. The first half of Devil of Dublin was absolutely 5 stars for me. I think the perspective of children was so interesting and like nothing I have ever read before, especially in a dark romance novel. But about halfway through, it kind of just fizzled out. The second half was not bad, but I do think that it was pretty predictable. I do appreciate the fact that we saw Darby be able to take back some of her autonomy. She became more independent. She even, became a little bit of a badass. And we love to see that. Yes, Darby, you go girl. I think my main issue, and I don't even want to call it an issue because it's just kind of a small nitpicky thing. I wish we had more time with Darby and Kellen as adults, allowed us to kind of see the dynamic grow and become comfortable in that adult age. We had so much history with them as children that I think the romance and the intimacy between them as adults was not nearly as fleshed out as it was when they were children. If we had not had that kind of build and that exposition of their relationship as kids, I think the relationship in the adult era would have really fallen flat, because we didn't get a lot of them, being together, just the two of them. It was more so like we're running, we're crying, were running, and I wish we would have had more soft, intimate moments between them as adults. But all in all, Devil of Dublin by BB Easton was rated 4 out of 5 stars for me. I thought the depiction of the Irish scenery was absolutely beautiful. The integration of the Irish folklore was so unique and unlike anything I had ever read. I thought that the perspective of children was very unique as well. And overall, I really enjoyed both of our main characters. I thought that they were very dynamic, very fleshed out individuals that both struggled with their past traumas and were able to overcome them and become confident and autonomous adults. I do think that you should give it a try. If you have read it, please let me know what you thought. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any books that you think I should read or that I might like, let me know in the comments below. Next time, I will be talking about a dark fantasy romance. And thank you guys so much for joining my book club. My name is Liza, and I will see you next time. Bye.